Welcome back. We now turn to our Reporters Roundtable. And joining us today, it's just one reporter. It's Brendan Moore with Lee Enterprises. Thank you so much for being here.
Always a pleasure, Cole.
Wanted to have you on because you wrote a good article this week, a profile on Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton. But at the same time, while it focused on the Lieutenant Governor, it also just centered around the exact question that a lot of people are wondering right now, and that is, what is Dick Durbin going to do? Is he going to run again? Is he going to step aside? What does his political future look like? And I was just curious if that was a central question for you, obviously, as you're going through that whole reporting process.
Yeah, it absolutely was. I mean, I think that's really the central question that a lot of people in Illinois politics are asking. I mean, all eyes really are on Dick Durbin as he wrestles with this really big decision that has really big consequences for Illinois politics and government. Obviously, I profiled Lieutenant Governor Stratton, who has taken steps to ready a Senate campaign. She has a federal PAC. She has been kind of boosting her profile, even some subtle references in press conferences with the governor. She talks about the Pritzker-Stratton administration now, really trying to play up her role in the administration. So that's just one example, but obviously there are others. Earlier this week, Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy announced that he raised $3 million in the last fundraising quarter. He has $19 million in the bank. You don't do that just to run for re-election to Congress. He's been traveling the state too. So you have just a few examples just right there of people that are kind of waiting in the wings for Senator Durbin to make a decision. He told us reporters a few weeks ago down here in central Illinois that he was going to make a decision soon. He told Chicago TV last week, I believe, that it could come in the next few weeks. So we should get some clarity pretty soon on what his decision is, and we'll see, depending on what it is, just kind of how those dominoes fall.
It's going to be very interesting to see if he decides to run again, as a hypothetical, whether or not what has happened the past few weeks will change the way that news is received. I think if we would have talked about this a month ago, and there was a conversation of, okay, what happens if Durbin runs again? There might have been just respect for the seat, respect for his career, to not challenge him. Maybe in a primary, or there wouldn't be that fight that we've seen so many people gearing up for now. But that might have changed just in the past couple of weeks. There was the big debate in D.C. over the continuing resolution that the spending plan that the Trump administration wanted to pass, and Durbin was one of a few senators that sided with Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer in voting for it and also voting against cloture to avoid a filibuster on that particular topic. That made a lot of Democrats really angry, and it makes me wonder now if even if Durbin says he's running again, we still get that primary and we still get a fight for that seat.
Yeah, I think really what we're seeing in Democratic politics now is a divide between, who is perceived to be fighting and who is maybe placating or business as usual.
That's the way the governor's put it. I mean, he's drawn that line between those two sides.
I mean, I think a lot of people are frustrated with folks that have been around Washington for a long time who they perceive as operating as if this is a normal Republican administration. Clearly, a lot of the actions taken by this administration have been abnormal, have been different. Some would say it is a crisis. Democrats would certainly say that. A lot of the base would say that. And so there is this question of who are the right people to, I guess, be an opposition party in the opposition to President Trump and Republicans. And you also have the fact that we saw President Joe Biden age in office last time. He visibly got older and more frail, and so you have more attention on some of these older elected officials that have been around a while. Senator Durbin is 80. He would be 88 at the end of a new term if he did go for it and serve it out. And so I think there is new scrutiny on that. And he hasn't had a serious primary, I believe, since he first ran for the Senate. That was in 1996. He beat Pat Quinn pretty decisively. But I think he would get a credible primary challenge because I do think there is some of that energy in the party. Now, would it be a Juliana Stratton or Raja Krishnamurthy or any of these folks that maybe are viewed as front runners if he were not to run? I don't think they would, but who's to say that, you know, an ambitious, maybe younger elected official, you know, maybe somebody who's a little more progressive, you know, kind of takes more of a we have to take the fight to Trump type of attitude. I would not be surprised to see somebody like that maybe take a shot at it. A name that gets thrown around a little bit is State Senator Robert Peters, who is not up for election in 2026, so he would have a free pass at it. He basically he's co-sponsor of the Safety Act, which ended cash bail in Illinois, so he has some progressive cred. I would not be surprised if you saw somebody like that, or kind of in that vein, that you know, progressive, new generation type of mold, maybe take a chance at running against Senator Durbin if he does run again.
It would give a really good look at the optics of the Democratic Party. And we saw a few years ago the power struggle between basically Durbin and Governor Pritzker for who had leadership of the party. The governor won out in that particular regard. It hasn't gotten too, you know, snippy back and forth between the two of them, maybe besides this resolution vote that Durbin decided to take. That got a little bit of there was some, not face-to-face confrontation, obviously, but some words back and forth in that particular area. But I guess with this whole, you said in your first answer, you ended it with, we'll see how the dominoes fall. And that's the other piece of this, because as soon as if Durbin says, I'm not running again, and the swarm of people rush to go for the Senate seat, and then you have all of the other potential seats that are up in the air. We still don't know if Governor Pritzker is going to run again. Mm-hmm. We still haven't heard officially on that. We have all of his cabinet there, the constitutional officers that are there to potentially pop out to other races. We have the mayor of Chicago in 2 years as well, which will definitely get some attention from some big names, obviously. There's just a ton of different potential seats opening up in 2 years that everybody's just going to have to pick a side on, and they're going to have to jump into a barrel if they're looking to move up their ambitions. And if Juliana Stratton runs for Senate, that leaves Governor Pritzker's lieutenant governor spot open if he decides to run again on the ticket. So then there's another one there. It's just going to be it will be the first domino, and it'll be a chaotic setup for the Democratic Party for 2026.
Right, these seats don't come open very often. Senator Durbin will serve 30 years in the Senate at the end of this term. So it's literally a once in a generation opportunity, and it is the biggest domino to fall because, as you mentioned, we don't know if Governor Pritzker is going to run yet, but the widely expected, the belief in political circles is that he's going to run for a third term.
Yeah.
So what you have is basically you have what's I would call Senate lane and mayor lane. So you have candidates that are kind of being put into buckets of, you know, they may run for Senate if Senator Durbin retires, or they're planning to run for mayor against Brandon Johnson, Chicago mayor against Brandon Johnson in 2027. And so with that, again, if the Durbin domino falls, then you potentially get, again, I mentioned Raja Krishnamurthy, but Congresswoman Lauren Underwood is also expected to look at the race, Congressman Robin Kelly, perhaps. So those are 3 congressional seats right there that would open up. Those would be competitive Democratic primaries in the very expensive Chicago TV market. And then obviously if Lieutenant Governor Stratton runs for Senate, then Lieutenant Governor opens up, and Governor Pritzker would have to presumably fill that if he is running again.
And the interesting part with that as well is if we've heard, like you said at the beginning, a lot of it's the Pritzker-Stratton administration, and there hasn't been any indication that there wouldn't be, that support from the from Governor Pritzker to Stratton. I don't know if it would be if he would publicly take a side in a primary. I'm not saying anything like that, but it would be interesting to see that lieutenant governor role if that becomes a kind of ramp for people looking for that maybe bigger jump out of that office. They could establish the the roadmap, I guess, with Stratton in this particular case.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of laid it out in my piece that, as you know, Cole, the Lieutenant Governor's office is kind of a sleepy office. There are not a lot of statutory responsibilities. The governor kind of has a lot of role to play in terms of giving the Lieutenant Governor things to do. I mean, they chair a few boards, and basically it's kind of a blank canvas. But again, you are also the number 2 elected official in the state. You know, you would take over if the governor has to resign, dies in office, or is removed. And we saw that pretty recently when Governor Blagojevich was removed and Pat Quinn became governor.
Yeah.
And we could also see it again because, again, I'm not, saying anything that is out of bounds. And Governor Pritzker,
2028
is probably going to be a candidate for president in 2028. And on the off chance that he's successful in that endeavor, that person would accede to the governorship. So in that way, it becomes perhaps a bigger decision than maybe it would be if you're kind of expecting to be there for the 4 years. If you think you have a chance at winning the presidency and you know that your lieutenant governor is going to be governor, then you want somebody that can step into that role on day one and hit the ground running. Doesn't need to grow into the job because, again, 2028 is right around the corner, and so you don't have time to ramp up as fast as maybe, again, Lieutenant Governor Stratton has had 6 years to be in that role. You'd be thrust into it, pretty quickly, depending on, again, how that domino falls in 2028.
There's another piece to this that we've just haven't been talking about, and that's the Republican Party. I mean, to be fair, we haven't mentioned that yet. And a Senate seat is a statewide office that they would definitely have their eyes on as well. And Durbin's had his races, and obviously Duckworth ran in her previous race, ran against Kathy Salvi, and won pretty handily in that. But this is a completely different scenario than running against an incumbent. If that Senate seat were to pop open, you would have what could potentially be a bloodbath of a primary for the Democratic Party with all these people fighting it out just to maybe get that one Republican candidate in there. There are one or two. We're talking about a Trump midterm year. So Trump's not on the ballot to potentially drive votes the way we saw it in 2024. But it would be interesting to see who pops up for that Republican candidate in that race, were it to be an open seat, and were there to really be this feeling within the Republican Party that they have a shot at it, who they're able to recruit, who they're able to put out there.
Yeah, and I know some of this is getting to inside baseball, but it is important for people to know that, I mean, there's not a lot of talk right now about what's happening on the Republican side. I mean, all the talk is on the Democratic primary because the widespread belief is that is paramount kind of to the general election because Illinois is a blue state. It's a midterm year. Republicans control the White House. Typically, the opposite party does better. Party out of power does better in a midterm year. But there will be a Republican candidate. There will be a Republican nominee. They will have a primary. I have not heard any big names. They also have to obviously put up a candidate for governor. Mm-hmm. In a way, even though the Republican, the seat could be open for the Senate, maybe that's a little bit easier. It's a lot harder to raise federal dollars than it is state dollars. So
they're already not doing too hot with that.
And they're not doing too hot with that. But so and obviously federal races are a lot more nationalized. I mean, you can't really every race is nationalized now, but you can still differentiate a little bit, in state level offices, governor and on down. But Senate, I mean, you are tied directly to what's happening in Washington.
Oh yeah.
And obviously President Trump is not very popular in Illinois, and whoever the Republican candidate is going to be tied to President Trump and to his record, and we don't know what that's going to look like in a few years. Obviously, there's been a lot of
developments.
A lot of developments lately. Obviously, we saw a lot with tariffs this week, but it's going to be an uphill sled for the Republicans. I mean, we didn't even talk about local elections, but the party got wiped out in a lot of places.
And there is not a lot of optimism going into a midterm already. I mean, just for like some of these races, the suburbs are often talked about in Illinois for Republican, like what Republicans need to do to get control of the state back. And for this to be the way that this 2026 is shaping up already for a year that they really need a governor's, like they really want the governor's, a good candidate out there for governor and to take a shot. We're not quite at the map making phase yet, but that's obviously the big target that they want to hit for when they can get some footholds back, so it's not another decade of issues here in the Capitol for the Republican Party. But there's not a lot of optimism given what's happening in D.C.
No, there's not. And you know, obviously the Senate race, I mean, it'll be on the same ballot as governor, but they impact each other because, you know, if Governor Pritzker runs again, then that's going to scare off a lot of maybe what we be perceived as Republicans who have a better chance of winning, because whoever runs on that side is going to face a barrage of ads. You know, Governor Pritzker spent at least $170 million on each of his campaigns for governor, and nobody can balance that, can counteract that.
And that being said, while it definitely wouldn't be the investments that would be there if Pritzker were running himself, even if he didn't, you would, just because he might have higher aspirations doesn't mean his money's not still going to be felt here in Illinois. I have a feeling he wouldn't just leave the seat entirely alone without any sort of initiative on who he wants to fill it in a certain way after the fact. It would be interesting to see how he would continue to try to impact Illinois politics, even if he looks for the more national scale office.
Yes, I mean, it'll be interesting. I mean, obviously this is, you know, down the line.
Yeah, we're projecting 2 years out. I mean, what could go wrong?
I know, right? But to your point, I mean, there is danger in relying on one person, you know, too heavily for your funding. You know, we saw that with the Republicans, with Governor Rauner, Ken Griffin, Dick Uihlein. Like, you had three, you know, maybe a handful more of people that were basically propping up the party. And that was great when they were doing that, but when they stopped, when the spigot turned off, the Republicans were really hurting. And the Democrats, I mean, obviously they're in a much stronger position. You know, the labor unions give a lot of money, the trial lawyers give a lot of money. You know, they have a base of support, and then that has not stopped. Like, Governor Pritzker has financed a lot of his own endeavors, but in the legislature, you know, a lot of those interest groups still play a role. So it's not like there wouldn't be any infrastructure, but yeah, I mean, I think that's something that the governor has thought about, like, how do I leave the party in better shape than I found it? You know, how do I leave, like, the infrastructure, you know, necessary for Democrats to continue winning in Illinois, even when he's not on the stage and not spending hundreds of millions of dollars every 4 years.
Let's see when that first domino falls. It's seemingly been Dick Durbin's going to make his choice in the next few weeks for the past 6 months. So we'll see when he actually makes that call, and then we'll see how quickly everything else doesn't fall into place, but everything stacks up.
And a reminder, I mean, I believe you can't start passing petitions to get on the ballot until, I think, July or August. Yeah. So technically speaking, he has more time if he wants to take it, but obviously, Senate race, you have to raise money, you have to get volunteers, hire staff, and so let's just say there's a lot of people that are, you know, impatiently waiting for this decision.
Oh, absolutely. And there is an advantage for them to get out in front and be that first person that jumps into the race for the name recognition side, even if it's not getting the petitions filed or anything like that, but just to publicly say, yeah, I'm doing this, like, hey, look at me. That's a part of it, I think, is, I know we're still 2 years out, but that's some of the energy we're seeing, at least with some of the people stacking up. But Brendan, I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure, Cole.
We'll be right back.